When a hiker vanished into the mist of Black Hollow Ridge, he left behind only whispers and a chilling mystery. 7 years later, he emerged, alive but unrecognizable, with a story so surreal, even seasoned survivalists question its truth. Ethan Cole never thought his life would become a local legend, let alone a national headline. At 32, he was a seasoned hiker who had scaled countless peaks and trekked across rugged terrains all over the country. Yet on a misty morning in late August, he stepped onto Black Hollow Ridge and vanished without a trace. Standing at the trailhead that morning, Ethan felt a mix of excitement and reverence. The trail was known for its jagged cliffs, unpredictable weather, and narrow passes where one misstep could lead to disaster. Still, it was precisely that sense of danger that drew him in. He'd never shied away from a challenge. In fact, conquering the unforgiving landscape of Black Hollow Ridge was a goal he'd been building toward for years. He checked his gear one last time. A blue backpack stuffed with survival essentials, dehydrated meals, a small first aid kit, extra socks, and a water filtration device. 2 reliable trekking poles that had guided him across deserts and mountains alike. A lightweight tent carefully rolled at the bottom of his pack. A sturdy pair of hiking boots that showed scuffs from a dozen previous journeys. Before setting off, Ethan called his sister Claire. "I'm at the base now," he said, pressing his phone to his ear. "Don't worry about me. I'll check in when I reach the next waypoint." "Please do," Claire replied, a hint of anxiety creeping into her voice. "Dad wants you to send a picture once you get there." "Will do," Ethan promised, flashing a grin at the phone. He was always quick to reassure his loved ones. "Love you, sis." He ended the call, slid his phone into the pocket of his cargo pants, and started the trek. He was alone on the trail, which was exactly how he liked it. Ethan relished solitude in nature. No traffic, no crowds, just the whisper of wind through pines and the crunch of leaves underfoot. Hours slipped by. The path grew steeper, the air thinner. A heavy fog rolled in, making the sun a faint glow behind layers of cloud. Ethan, well-versed in navigation, kept a steady pace. Yet something felt off that day. The ridge was eerily silent, as if even the birds had decided to keep their distance. He tried not to let the stillness unnerve him. When dusk arrived, he realized he was behind schedule. He paused at a vantage point to take in the sweeping view, endless forests stretching below, peaks rising in the distance. He snapped a few photos to send to Claire once he reached higher ground with a signal, but he never made that call. Days later, local authorities were alerted that Ethan was missing. A rescue operation swung into motion. Helicopters scanned the ridge from above. Volunteers and park rangers searched every known trail and hidden nook. They combed the region methodically, hoping to find a clue. Eventually, they found something. A blue backpack resting against a neat pile of rocks. Next to it, his trekking poles lay carefully placed, as though someone had arranged them with intent. The arrangement was too deliberate to be a random accident. Yet, there was no sign of Ethan. No footprints, no disturbed foliage, no piece of clothing snagged on a branch. It was as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Rumors ignited like sparks on dry grass. Did he fall into a hidden ravine? Was he attacked by a wild animal? Could he have staged his own disappearance to escape something? Speculation ran rampant, but no theory provided concrete answers. The rescue teams, undeterred, pushed deeper into the rugged wilderness. Still, every lead turned cold. Hope began to wane, and fear settled in. The man who had confidently strode into Black Hollow Ridge had vanished, leaving only a cryptic scene by a pile of rocks. In the immediate aftermath of Ethan's disappearance, the Cole family rallied with desperate energy. Claire and her father, Greg, couldn't rest until they had scoured every possible avenue. During the first week, Black Hollow Ridge was swarmed with search and rescue teams. Helicopters hovered low, scanning for any flash of color or movement. Volunteers arrived in droves, friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had heard about the missing hiker. Despite the overwhelming support, they found no trace of Ethan, save for the bag and poles discovered earlier. The tension was palpable at the Cole household. Their mother, Diane, paced the living room, her phone always in hand, waiting for an update. Greg spent sleepless nights on the computer, studying topographical maps of the area, trying to guess which path Ethan might have taken. Claire, caught between her father's desperation and her mother's tears, tried to stay strong. She set up social media pages, plastered the neighborhood with missing person flyers, and coordinated with local hikers' forums. About a month later, with the official search winding down, the Cole family refused to stop. Greg and Claire pooled their life savings to hire private trackers, Retired Special Forces members, expert survivalists, anyone who claimed to have the skills to find a missing person in treacherous terrain. These professionals ventured into the heart of Black Hollow Ridge, returning each time with only theories, not evidence. Meanwhile, the rest of the world began to move on. The local news that once covered Ethan's disappearance around the clock shifted to other stories. Online interest dwindled, overshadowed by new headlines. But for the Coles, every day without answers felt like an eternity. By the time a full year had passed, the urgency of the search had subsided. There were no more official rescue operations, and the media's spotlight had shifted. For the Cole family, though, the pain was still raw. They were trapped in a limbo of unknowing. No closure, no proof of life, no evidence of death. Then a spark of hope. A hiker reported seeing a mysterious figure living off the land deep in the woods of Black Hollow Ridge. The man was described as thin, with sunburnt skin and ragged clothing. Could this be Ethan? Claire latched onto this lead like a lifeline. She gathered a small team, friends, and a private tracker, and hurried out to investigate. They discovered a makeshift shelter hidden between towering pines. Inside were old fire pits, scattered animal bones, and crude fishing tools fashioned from sticks and stones. It looked like someone had been there for quite some time, surviving in the wild, but whoever had called this place home was gone. No sign remained to confirm that it was Ethan. Claire felt her heart sink. She was standing so close to what she believed could be the truth, but it slipped through her fingers like sand. Still, she pressed on. She had to, because the alternative, giving up, was unthinkable. By year 5, a judge officially declared Ethan deceased. It was a formality, a legal step to settle financial and estate matters, but to Claire, it felt like a betrayal. She stood in the courtroom listening to the judge's solemn declaration and felt rage burn in her chest. How could they declare him dead when they hadn't found a body? How could a piece of paper carry so much weight? On top of that, their mother, Diane, died a week later of what the doctors called broken heart syndrome. On the anniversary of his disappearance, Claire returned to Black Hollow Ridge with a small wooden cross. She found the spot where Ethan's backpack and trekking poles had been discovered, now overgrown with weeds and shrubs. She placed the cross in the earth, tears blurring her vision. For the first time, she spoke the words she never wanted to say. Goodbye, Ethan. The Cole family tried to move on, each in their own way. Claire married a man named Daniel, who provided a comforting shoulder and a stable life. They had a son named Oliver, who brought a new kind of joy into her world. Greg moved to a smaller home in a neighboring town, working odd jobs and trying to heal. Then, 2 years later, 7 years after Ethan disappeared, the man no one had expected to see alive again walked back into town like he'd never left. News spread like wildfire across the community. Ethan Cole was alive. The first sighting was at a small diner on the outskirts of the town. The waitress on shift was a friend of Claire's, and she recognized Ethan immediately, despite his dramatically changed appearance. He entered the diner barefoot, wearing torn, sun-bleached clothes, his hair matted and grown past his shoulders. His skin was deeply tanned, his eyes hollow and distant. He asked for a glass of water as though it were the most normal request in the world. Word reached Claire's ears in a flurry of phone calls and text messages. She stood in her living room, frozen in disbelief. She'd spent years imagining what she would do if Ethan ever returned. Throw her arms around him, burst into tears, demand answers. But now she found herself paralyzed, unsure whether to believe it was truly him. Greg, too, heard the news and rushed to the diner. By the time he arrived, local authorities were already there, guiding Ethan outside. A small crowd had gathered, phones raised, snapping photos. The local news station arrived within the hour, cameras rolling. Ethan stood amidst the chaos, silent and detached. His once confident posture was replaced by a slight stoop, as though the weight of the world pressed down on him. When Greg finally laid eyes on his son, he broke down, tears streaming down his cheeks. Ethan stared at him, blinking in confusion, as if he struggled to place his own father. Claire arrived soon after, her heart pounding. The moment she saw Ethan, her breath caught in her throat. He looked like a ghost of himself, a man who had stepped out of a nightmare. She longed to run to him, to hold him, but something in his distant gaze made her hesitate. Instead, she approached slowly, tears gathering in her eyes. "Ethan?" she whispered. He nodded, his lips trembling as he tried to speak. No words came out at first. Then, in a voice raspy from disuse, he said, "Claire?" She reached out to touch his arm. His skin felt rough, calloused, and scarred in places. That brief contact opened the floodgates. She hugged him, sobbing, and felt him shake against her. For a moment, the world fell away, leaving only the two of them in an emotional embrace. But behind the joy lurked uncertainty. Where had he been all this time? How had he survived? Why hadn't he returned sooner? The questions swirled, too tangled for anyone to articulate in that moment. Ethan was rushed to the hospital for evaluation. Doctors found him malnourished and dehydrated, with a host of minor injuries that had healed improperly over the years. He underwent a barrage of tests, blood work, and psychological evaluations. Through it all, he barely spoke, seeming overwhelmed by the cacophony of modern life, flashing lights, beeping machines, the chatter of people all around him. It took weeks before Ethan felt ready to speak about his ordeal. Even then, it was slow going. He often lapsed into silence, staring at his hands as though he couldn't believe he was really there. With time, therapy, and the gentle patience of his family, he began to piece together the tale of his disappearance. He spoke haltingly at first, as though dredging up memories from a distant dream. "I was on the trail when a rock slide came out of nowhere," he said, his voice strained. "I remember the ground shaking, boulders tumbling down. One hit me on the shoulder and I slid into a ravine. Everything after that is a blur. I woke up at the bottom, with my leg twisted, my head pounding. I couldn't climb back up." He recounted how he managed to crawl through the ravine, each movement sending jolts of pain through his body. Eventually, he found a small stream and followed it, hoping it would lead him to a road or campsite. But the terrain was unforgiving, and he was disoriented. He described building crude traps to catch small animals. The first time he succeeded, he cried from relief, but also from guilt at taking a life. Hunger and desperation had turned him into a survivalist, far removed from the civilized world he once knew. He recalled the heartbreak of hearing the thrum of helicopter blades, only to watch them disappear over the treetops, leaving him stranded once more. Each near rescue chipped away at his hope. He didn't know where he was, and it seemed that none of the rescuers could spot him so deep into the forest. Whenever he heard voices, he would scream back that he was still there, but no one ever heard him. And so he walked and walked, hoping to meet someone, but accidentally led himself deeper and deeper into the unknown. Eventually, Ethan stumbled upon an abandoned hunting shack deep in the forest. The structure was old, its walls riddled with holes, but it offered some protection from the elements. Inside, he found rusted tools and a small pot. He used these to cook whatever he could catch. The shack became his home, a lonely refuge from the relentless wild. But then he woke up one morning, an inexplicable determination coursing through him. Perhaps it was a dream of home, or a sudden shift in the wind that reminded him of civilization. He decided to make one last attempt to leave. "I walked for days," he recalled, voice trembling. "Followed a river downstream, crossed areas I'd never seen before. There were times I thought I'd pass out and never get up again, but I kept going." Finally, he found a dirt road. Hours later, it led him to a paved highway, and from there, he caught a ride on the back of a farmer's truck to the outskirts of town. The family listened, hearts heavy. Claire felt tears slip down her cheeks. She realized Ethan had lived a nightmare beyond her worst imaginings. Greg said nothing at first, merely clasped his son's hand and squeezed it, as if afraid that letting go would cause his son to vanish again. Ethan's return, though miraculous, was not the joyful reunion they had once envisioned. The years of surviving in the wild had changed him in profound ways. Daily life overwhelmed him. The noise of cars and phones, the glare of artificial lights, the simple act of sleeping on a mattress. It all felt alien. He startled easily, especially at sudden movements or loud sounds. Nightmares plagued him. Some nights he awoke drenched in sweat, convinced he was still trapped in that shack. He found it impossible to hold a normal conversation for long. At the dinner table, he often grew silent, retreating into himself. The abundance of food was a shock. He would eat in small portions, as though he expected the meal to vanish if he indulged too much. However, within the family, the emotional turmoil ran deep. Claire had spent years grieving. She had even said goodbye. Now she found herself grappling with the guilt of having moved on. She was a wife and a mother, her life anchored in a new reality. How could she integrate Ethan into this life when he felt like a stranger at times? Greg tried to reconnect with his son. He encouraged Ethan to stay with him, to reclaim the father-son bond they'd once had, but Ethan seemed distant. The father who had once been his role model was now an older man, burdened by years of heartbreak. They struggled to talk about anything beyond surface-level matters. And then there was the greatest sorrow of all. Ethan's mother was gone. He learned of her death in the hospital, and the news shattered him. He wept for days, inconsolable. He felt a crushing guilt that he hadn't returned in time to see her again. He wondered if she had died, thinking he had abandoned her. This thought haunted him more than any night he spent in the wild. Months passed. Slowly, Ethan learned to navigate modern life again. Therapy sessions helped him articulate the trauma he had endured. He began to see that his survival was not just a physical act, but an emotional and spiritual one as well. He wasn't the same person who had walked onto that trail, but perhaps he could still find meaning in the life he had now. However, life didn't magically become perfect. There were still challenges. Ethan had flashbacks, Claire worried about his mental state, and Greg struggled to reconcile the lost years with the present. But they faced these challenges together, a family trying to mend what had been broken. In time, Ethan found ways to share his experiences, not for fame or fortune, but to help others understand the will to survive. He volunteered at a local outdoor education center, teaching young hikers the importance of safety and preparedness. He spoke gently, with humility and empathy, and he listened, truly listened, to those who came to him with their own stories of loss or hardship. Through these connections, Ethan discovered that returning to civilization wasn't just about reclaiming his old life. It was about forging a new one, shaped by the trials he had endured. And as he watched Oliver grow, and saw the sparkle of relief in his father's eyes each time they shared a moment, he felt a quiet sense of purpose. In the end, the forest gave him back to the world, but not unchanged. The mountains and trees had left their mark on him, scars both physical and emotional. Yet those scars were also reminders of what he had overcome. Standing on his sister's porch one evening, Ethan looked up at the stars. They were the same stars he had gazed upon countless nights in the wild, but now they shone with a different meaning. He was no longer alone beneath them. His journey was far from over, but at least he wasn't walking it in solitude. Do you believe Ethan's story? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.